too. Good, sir.
Cool.
Is this the beginning of the day or the middle of the day?
It's the middle of the day. Yeah,
Okay.
I know it's late at night for you now in
All
Greece.
all good. There's no rest for the wicked, as the saying goes. So excited to be here. Excited to share some of the things that we're working on. Excited to talk about Ethereum staking and all the rest of it. So
Great.
yeah,
Great.
let me know how you wanna get through it.
Great. Yeah, it'd be good to start if you like do a quick intro of yourself, how you got into crypto staking, like kind of your journey all the way to rated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of fell down the rabbit hole in crypto about 2017, and way before that, sort of my first exposure to Bitcoin was around 2013, 2014. I was living with a good friend of mine, and then he couldn't stop talking about it. Initially, it sounded crazy. Then I started actually realizing that there's some really interesting properties there. And then, so as Richard actually hinted on before, I'm Greek originally. And so as probably many of you watching know, Greece went through a troublesome decade in the 2010s. And really 2015 was the worst possible year. So capital controls, people not being able to like pull money out of their bank accounts to the tune, like I think there was a cap of like 300 or 400 euros per account and so on, like ATMs running out of money, like really dire situation. And that was really for me kind of the key to everything that unlocked sort of my mind to really understand like what this whole thing is about, right? So that was the moment when I was sold, but then I wasn't really sort of interested to the tune that I am now, where I really spend most of my day thinking about this type of stuff. In 2017, when Ethereum came along, and then I got into it from the fun and trading perspective. Then the more I researched and understood the technology, the more I got drawn to that. And then I spent 3 years with a fund called General Partner Capital as their first hire. I helped build product and the research functions there, helped them raise a $75 million fund too, and then moved on. And the next thing that I did was join a startup called Bison Trails. And Bison Trails really, in a few short years, built the largest platform for staking in a non-custodial fashion. And what I did there was we called the role of protocol specialist, which is a lot more popular as a term and as a bundle of responsibility in the industry now. But back then, I think it was just the second person to be called that. The first was the person that hired me. And what we did was really our job was to be the source of context in terms of what's happening with these networks, what's happening in terms of consensus, what's happening in terms of agent sets, what are the different nodes that operate these networks and what are their roles, and then help disseminate that context, basically be the guardian of that context across the company and help disseminate it inside and out. And so I worked with that company for about a year. Then we were acquired by Coinbase, stayed in that role for another year. And throughout this engagement and this experience, I kept stumbling upon a real problem that this budding industry had. Just to give you like an idea of an order of magnitude, this industry is built on a consensus mechanism called proof of stake, which is kind of the successor, if you will, to proof of work, which has now become relatively ubiquitous in the industry. And while we were operating, there was really no data to go by, not only in terms of just evaluating how these networks are doing, but also evaluating us as an operation, versus the context of our network, versus people that we coexist with or that we might compete with, and so on. So really, it was like flying blind, right? And at the same time, you saw this industry balloon from like obscurity to, I guess, $350 billion in asset value in staking, and about 75% of that run by node operating businesses. Really, you think that, wow, this is like crazy growth in such a short time, that it really made you think that, well, this industry, it being so nascent and so on, it really doesn't have access to any of the utilities that like more mature industries do, right? Like insurance, like credit, like other financial products and so on. And these financial products are basically, the lifeblood of them is data about these businesses and how they operate, how much they're earning, and what sort of risk profiles underlie them. And really, that was kind of the impetus for leaving Coinbase and then getting full time into what we're doing now, which is rated, and I'm happy to kind of get a little bit more into detail about what it is that we do.
Yeah, so it seems like from your time at Coinbase and Bison Trails, you kind of learned that the staking operators are this black box where you kind of have no idea like what their security setup is, what their uptime is. You have some sense of how much they're earning in yield, but it's really just a black box. There's not much data around staking in general. So you wanted to build like kind of the one-stop place to get everything staking data related.
That's right. And really, staking is just the start in the way we think about it, right? Like, so the big vision is that we as a team, and I think a bunch of us here believe in this idea that, you know, there is a better financial system to be built, and that is natively on the internet. And there are some really, really strong properties that these blockchains actually have in terms of hosting that financial system, right? So if we are to see that type of future evolve and materialize, then it's nodes all the way down, right? There's going to be different agents. There's going to be validators. There's going to be relayers, nodes that are responsible for like passing data from one chain to the other, or from one environment or one server to another. There's oracles, which is, you know, they're responsible for bringing data on chain. These are all nodes that are operated by people, right? And it's this whole idea, like who watches the watchers and so on. So and these people have objective functions, and these objective functions sort of manifest in the behavior of the machine. And so this is kind of like this whole like honeypot or melting pot of different sort of streams of thought, sort of kind of led us to crystallize what we're working on as reputation for machines. And we're purposefully kind of talking about machines and not nodes or validator nodes and so on, because we started from Ethereum because Ethereum is the most consequential network out there at the moment. It has, you know, the most value built on top of it, the biggest developer community and mindshare around that. It has the most mature ecosystem around it of traditional companies and on-chain companies and protocols or meta protocols or whatever you want to call them that exist in that ecosystem. And so we thought that if we are going to actually test whether this idea of ours matters at all or not, we better do it in an environment where we'll get the maximum, we'll maximize the probability to get the richest feedback that we possibly can. And I guess so far, so good.
Cool. And you have a product live, right? It's been rated, yeah. Like the website's been live for almost a year now.
That's right. That's right. And it's changed quite a bit. The way we look at it. So you can go and access the Network Explorer.
Yeah, I think it's better if we do a demo. I don't know if you can share a screen on your settings. If you can't, then I could do it on my side and then tell me where to click and scroll.
Yeah, give me a sec. I think I can share my screen. Let's see. Rated. There we go. Share.
Great.
All right. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Lovely. So this is basically what we call the rated network explorer. And some of you might be familiar with the term block explorer, where basically it's an indexing and an illustration of the chain and what happens on the chain. But the index, the key to that database and how it manifests as product, is the block. What we've done, and kind of like our philosophy and the way we're approaching this, is actually the index is the validator, right? Because this is what we're trying to, this is the information that we're trying to aggregate and the profile that we're trying to put together. So what we've done is basically contextualize the Ethereum's base layer and infrastructure set, and try and basically illustrate all these different entities that operate at different levels in terms of their position in the network, right? So you have pools, for example, that are at the capital aggregation layer. These pools then distribute effectively ETH and capital to these node operators that are responsible for actually operating machines that require, and perhaps it's actually worth very quickly going through what proof of stake is at a very high level. Proof of stake is a security algorithm, right? That basically helps prevent double spending in a database. It's a generalized game of truth telling, where a bunch of machines are watching what happens on an execution layer and are recording what they saw in terms of just finalizing it in history, right? And saying that, like, Richard sent a digital dollar to Elias, and then Elias sent back to another dollar back to his family. That all happened within the span of a block, and then it now gets moved. It becomes history, right? And that changes my wallet balance, it changes Richard's wallet balance, and so on. Proof of stake is really, it spits out security while it takes as input operational excellence and value at risk. And this is what the stake is, right? So you operate this machine, you want this machine to be available to the network to play this game of truth telling. But if it doesn't tell the truth, it stands to actually lose that value that has been put at risk in a process called slashing. And we can get to it, what slashing is, a little bit further down the line. So what we've done is basically contextualize what really the operational excellence aspect of things, and then what it's building upwards through kind of curating all that data, building upwards to an idea of, well, performance, risk, and then the externalities that these operators and that these pools actually exert to the rest of their network. So for example, let's pick a random one here. This is like an operator that has a surface on Ethereum, and then we surface data in terms of, you know, how well they're doing, what the return on the value at risk has been historically in different time frames, 30 days, in 1 day, in you know, an all-time frame, and then we go down in much more detail in terms of what sort of the particular elements that make up this idea of performance have been over time. And then we've, as you see, there's a bunch of coming soon elements here, and we will be enabling most of them in terms of Q1. So it's all kind of bound to be delivered in our Q1.
And how do you calculate the effectiveness rating of all of these validators and pools?
Yeah, so the effectiveness rating is really just tallying up all the deterministic points that you get allocated from the protocol, right? So you have to do certain jobs, like basically tell what time it is, tell what like place it is in terms of network terms, right? You're giving coordinates, and then you're also giving a time that you gave those coordinates. But think of not a map, but a network context. So there are certain things that you do that the protocol requires this machine to do. And if it does those things right, it gets rewarded with protocol inflation, basically. And you can see that if you follow this train of thought a little bit more closely that rewards are actually like very tightly linked to performance. But what we've done with the effectiveness rating is that we've separated all the bits, all the types of jobs that are actually not that deterministic and end up being more random. So you get like a big payout for just being available and you've been randomly allocated one. And now post the Ethereum merge, which is when, you know, Ethereum used to work in proof of work. Proof of work is also a security algorithm, but the inputs there are different. They are computing power and electricity, basically. And Ethereum transitioned and brought all this rich execution layer environment that underlies, so that lives on top of Ethereum, and brought it to proof of stake. So now, instead of having those miners that spend electricity and computing power to secure the network, you have all these validators that do the same job. And now these validators are also responsible for creating blocks, and for creating blocks they get rewarded in terms of transaction fees, effectively, and MEV, and we can get into what MEV is potentially a little bit later. But that's also random. We ran the numbers on what a validator stands to earn in terms of the rewards that they get from transaction fees, and you know, the tail is obscenely long. So if you then equate rewards earning to performance, you're just going to end up, you know, you put something that is really stochastic together with something that is very deterministic, and then the whole becomes as stochastic as the most stochastic random end. So we've really kind of distilled all that randomness away from a useful life of validator, and we're only basically counting, we're keeping score in terms of how well a validator did all these deterministic jobs that it needed to do, right? Which basically gives you the essence of what performance is.
Yeah, and I'm also curious why the staking rewards, like backwards APR percentage, like why there's a variance among different validators if they're all staking on ETH2. Is it just kind of the stochastic randomness, or is it like more idiosyncratic with each validator?
It's largely stochastic. There's an element of, okay, if you are not doing your deterministic duties not well, then you get rewarded less. And there's a significant variance there. If, for example, you drop below the 90% effectiveness rating, and you see like this view over here in this one is all the professional node operators, and most of them have, like, as you can see, they perform their deterministic jobs really well. But then as you start going down the pecking order, then you actually get like a pretty varied response there. Now, in terms of the APR varies way more because of this execution layer mechanism that we touched on just before, right? So what you see here is basically in Ethereum post merge, rather before the merge, miners used to be responsible for everything, right? From doing all the consensus jobs that help the network come to an agreement in terms of what the present state of reality and what the state change from one block to the next is, but also packaging together all this information that makes up this state change. With the merge in Ethereum coming along, you start actually separating this responsibility of validators now to pack and create blocks and create these the fabric of these state transitions. And this job has effectively been outsourced, right, to the tune of 90% of validators of Ethereum are outsourcing this job to specialized entities called builders through a software called MEVBoost that is built by an organization called Flashbots. And what they do is basically look at the flow of transactions that is coming through on mempools, private or public, and so on. This is kind of, think of it as sort of the waiting room, right, before you actually get in a block. And these entities specialize in optimizing the ordering of transactions and creating and squeezing as much value as they can from a block, right? Which basically a validator before the merge happened would earn about 4%, I think, on the ETH staked. And now you see that this number is actually like 50% larger for the most part. And really, from looking at the value of what you might call vanilla block or locally built blocks, which is the default software validator, we just like see some transactions in the public mempool, put them all in the block, and then pack it, is orders of magnitude higher actually when you outsource that job. But because the flow is actually random, right? There's times where the chain has a lot of activity because there's some crazy NFT mint, or it just randomly happened that a bunch of people were trying to transact, or it could be that a protocol in Ethereum is getting hacked, and then there's like a real large bounty, and whoever's on the other side of the hack wants their transaction to be included as quickly as possible so they can execute the exploit, right? And that results, for example, and has resulted into huge payouts for validators. So we've seen over Q4, we saw a 420 ETH payout for producing a block, whereas sort of the median is 0.15 or something like that. We've seen a 120 ETH value block. We've seen an 80 ETH value block and so on. So really, in terms of squeezing as much out as you can in that regard, it becomes a game of network penetration, like shots at the bat, if you will.
Yeah, I think what you all described is like ties to a broader point. It's actually a surprise it hasn't really been discussed much, but one of the underrated things that's happened since ETH 2, like proof of stake, is each layer of the stack has become hyper specialized. So back in the proof of work era, is like you have miners that are responsible for doing everything to become a miner. It's like you have to source the capital to buy your mining ASICs hardware. Then you have to download the mining client. You have to validate blocks and transactions. Then you have to get connected to a mining pool and hope that you can win blocks. And all of those layers that I described have like turned into like different industries nowadays with proof of stake, where you have like pools that specialize in one layer of the stack. You have node operators that specialize in another layer, kind of what you described with like MEV and like there's like customized clients. That's also another different layer. And like what's really cool about Rated is you get really insightful data on each layer, how the market's evolving in each layer, who the big players are, stuff like that.
Yep, that's right. And then with that wealth of data, we can then serve value back to the pools, for example. So what are these pools? These pools are, there's a varying degree of permission to permissionless, of on-chain to off-chain, but really what they do is they aggregate capital at the highest level. They aggregate capital and then they distribute that capital to node operators, right? Some are more complex and some are less complex, but really what the pool's job is, both in a programmatic way, but also in like a very human way, is to create coordination between all these different node operators, right? And the coordination overhead is actually really significant and material. And through the data that we collect and we comb, and through the pipelines that we're building, and through all the features that we support and we continue building in the API layer, we can help those pools with alleviate that coordination pain a little bit, right? From rewards accounting to performance monitoring to figuring out who they should onboard into their set, to figuring out maybe who they should kick from their set because they haven't been like a good steward of the pool or a good constituent of the pool. There's really like a whole suite of use cases that we're starting to uncover with a bunch of the folks that we're working with. But equivalently, we can also serve that data to back to node operators. We serve that data to referential applications like Nexus Mutual, for example, that's building insurance for slashing and things like downtime and so on, and act as a source of truth and a pricing input for these things. And we're looking forward to doing a lot more of all that stuff, as well as create ways and pipelines to bring that data on chain, right? And then there's like a really interesting at a very high level, and thinking just very far into the future, there's like a really interesting idea that we're ruminating on, and we're going like a little bit back and forth on, which is like, what does it mean for a network to sort of become self-aware and be self-aware, right? And like get data back about its own substance and take it back as an input, because a network really is, you know, it's a machine that doesn't understand it itself. But you know, we already see, like from the very early days that we put out the network explorer. We run the numbers the other day, and there has only been, so we launched the network explorer in February 2022, and there has only been a single month where the overall network effectiveness was lower than February 2022. I think I said 21 before, that was wrong. And that was the month of the merge, which was like a huge network upgrade, huge operational complexity. Obviously, like things are going to go wrong there. So we'd like to think that we've had a small part to play in it, because, you know, with products like the Network Explorer, you can really help the network become a little bit more self-aware, but at least in the human layer and not the machine layer. But humans can now understand like where the network is at. They can understand the correlates of their performance better, and they can also optimize for them.
Mm-hmm. And here under like node operators, I see like over like several dozen different node operators. I'm also curious, like in the long run, do you think it's going to become like more and more fragmented, that like it's going to become a commoditized space, or if it's going to become like more winner take all, where like one operator will get like a greater and greater share of the pie?
I think it already is. I don't think it's dissimilar to the banking space, for example, right? There's no one winner take all bank. There's thousands and thousands of banks all across the world, and really what they differentiate on is brand. And I think this is pretty quickly where the node operating space is going. I think that one, this can really, if there's no meteor that hits this industry, or there's like a black swan event that kills us all terminally, there's only one way this can go, and this is up and to the right in terms of like node operators, right? And node operator outfits existing and proliferating, because of that idea that, well, if we are heading in that direction of a financial system that's natively built on the internet, or like this idea of Web3, then really you need nodes to operate all of that, right? There's the demand for nodes and these types of services will always increase, and that will mean opportunity for people to create businesses in that space. So, you know,
so you think like node operators will become like, well, it already is like kind of fragmented, and like it's easy for someone to in theory to like become their own node. I want to ask the same question for staking pools. Like if you think that's also going to become like fragmented, or if it's like also like if it's like different and it's a winner take all dynamic.
It's a slightly different dynamic there, because let's for a moment consider what a liquid staking pool does, right? So a liquid staking pool takes deposits off of users and then issues them back effectively a token that is almost like a promissory note, that you can get your deposit back when it becomes available. We can talk about withdrawals and so on, but forget about the inability to withdraw your staking ETH on Ethereum, and let's assume that it exists. So what a liquid staking pool does is that you deposit ETH or some asset, then the pool delegates that asset to a node operator. The node operator performs validation duties and earns rewards and transaction fees, which means that it basically, after, at a point in the future, you will be able to come back with this promissory note token that you have, give it back to the pool, and then the pool will withdraw it from the node operator and then hand you back basically the asset that you powered proof of stake with, plus whatever the node operator has earned on your behalf, effectively net of some fee that is the reward for the node operator to perform their duties in the pool to exist and do this capital allocation, right? The cool thing about this promissory note in kind of like a flat programmable layer of money like Ethereum is, among other things, but it is also that, is that you can actually take this thing and use it as near money, because this chain of obligations that would be completely fragmented in a traditional financial system sense is now completely flat, and the majority of it is governed by code. So really, if something happens and your asset value, sort of, you get slashed, for example, and then your asset value diminishes, then that translates almost instantaneously. It's not instantaneous, but you can think of it as instantaneously to the value of that promissory note, with absolute guarantees, right? There's very little ways in which it could leak, although there are ways, and I don't know that it's worth going into.
Yeah, and the promissory note, like you describe it, another term for it is called like liquid staking derivatives.
Correct.
And like also like abbreviated as LSDs. And these are, what's really cool about these things is like you can then compose them in DeFi. Is like you can add them as collateral in Aave and Compound. You can trade them on DEXs, and that really like lets you, in a way, rehypothecate the ETH that's used in staking with DeFi. So like DeFi ETH doesn't have to compete with ETH that's used in staking.
Exactly. And the reason why the market dynamics in the pool space are different than in node operator space is that the more integrations you have of this thing, the more valuable it is, because it gives the user, the holder, a lot more economic optionality. You can now use it in many different places. You can trade it. You can earn yield. You can rehypothecate it more times and all that good stuff. It's also a matter of liquidity, right? Like these products, effectively, there's a whole process to get into a staking position with a validator and to get out, right? There's bottlenecks both on the way in and on the way out, which means time waiting. Now, with these things, which is a near token, if they also have deep liquidity, it means that you can enter and exit a staking position effectively near instantaneously also. So the thing there is that fragmentation is not conducive to this superior product. Concentration in terms of like liquidity and integrations just attracts more capital because it's a better product, and that's a self-reinforcing loop, right? Like more capital means more liquidity, more integrations, more resources, and so really the dynamic that we've seen is that the earliest sort of entrant in this market, which is Lido, has kind of like held and maintained like a very, very strong lead in that, and then we're instantiating pools as really the capital aggregation layer. So we're not only looking at liquid staking pools, but we're also looking at exchanges as pools, because that's what they do. They aggregate capital, and then they, of their customers, and some potentially of balance sheet, and then they allocate it into staking. But you'll see that the second pool in line in terms of network penetration is Rocket Pool, and then it's got less than 1/10 of Lido's footprint, right? So
yeah, Lido has like pretty big market dominance now, and I guess the cool thing about liquid staking is like you can get exposure to ETH2 staking just by buying ST ETH on exchanges, rather than like figuring out how to delegate to node operators, or set up your own node as well if you want to stake yourself. So it
That's
makes getting access to ETH staking and like the yields, which is around 6% right now, like more accessible to the masses.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I truthfully, I don't know if it's a winner takes all. It does look like it's a market that has this type of dynamic for sure. But I can also imagine a world where there are, say, like 3 or 4 different objective functions that overlap in some ways, but are distinctly different. So, you know, someone that has like that is institution-like and has real sort of KYC constraints that they need to satisfy and whatnot might be like terminally blocked from using something like Lido or participating in a pool that has the instantiates as Lido does. And so if you really think that there are like 2 to 3 different objective functions of users, like a set of like objectives that are trying to maximize subject to some constraints, then you could conceivably imagine that there's actually like space for, you know, a duopoly, or for, you know, 2 to 3 different shapes of pools and designs of pools that cater to like 3 main segments of users, and then you really don't end up with like a real winner takes all dynamic. But it's really still pretty early in this development, this industry's life cycle.
Yeah, we also have an interesting question from the chat. This is from Kevin again from Corner. He's like actually curious about, you know, the regulation around staking, and you know, a lot of you probably heard of the tweet, well, saw the tweet from Brian Armstrong yesterday saying that there's rumors that Gary Gensler at the SEC is gonna ban staking for US retail users. So yeah, curious your thoughts on that, how that affects, you know, Coinbase cracking these centralized staking pools, and like how does like the Ethereum ETH 2 staking network, how does the landscape shake out after that?
Truthfully, it doesn't bode very well, but it's also too early to tell. And I'm, disclaimer, no regulation expert or aficionado. So it's really like a waiting game. There is an argument to be made here that some finality in terms of what regulation looks like is good, because what the situation that we've been in this industry in general, not only in the staking space or the infrastructure space and so on, is that we have this like looming specter of regulation for years now, since as far as I can remember, right? Like all the way back to 2017, when I really started putting all my time in this industry. And so one can imagine that some finality will actually be good, but there's always the odd chance that this is the meteor that comes and kind of wipes everything out. I really don't think that things are going to pan out like that, like from the perspective of vested interests, to the size of this industry, to people that it employs, and so on and so forth, to the real value and tangible value that it brings to the world. I think it will be a negotiation process, and I think it will be probably drawn out to the tune of like 2 to 3 years. But I'm not going to say hope. I do think that we'll end up in a better place, but I don't think that the road to getting there will be necessarily easy.
Do you also have a sense of like who the types of users are that delegate to each pool? Like, is it fair to say that like Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, these centralized exchanges more catered towards, you know, institutions like funds like ourselves that we stake through Coinbase, and then, you know, Lido, Rocket Pool, these are more of like retail and ETH whales that like want to have ownership of the keys?
It really depends. So there's, you know, someone like Lido. So there's a dashboard that I built, and now we maintain over at Dune Analytics that tracks kind of the overview of the liquid staking industry, and it also tracks kind of like deposits to liquid staking protocols, right? In an atomic way. So like, from the largest deposit to all the way down to the smallest. And you can see like some actually pretty meaningful deposit sizes, specifically into Lido. So, to the tune of 50K, 40K, 25K. So Lido, like there's a really interesting set of user that we haven't really pulled out. And that's the on-chain native, call it a business, call it a protocol, call it a DAO. But they have a treasury that they need to manage and maintain to like, further the runway and maintain kind of like health in terms of the protocol, the DAO, whatever that is. And so, I think Nexus Mutual was the first that actually deposited into Lido. So I would say, in terms of Lido, there's retail users, sure. There's these DAOs, sure. There's also funds that participate, and there might be US funds, there might be Asian funds, and then these are sort of the different personas that we've been able to identify over the years.
You brought up Nexus Mutual. I totally forgot about that, but like Nexus Mutual is actually one of the largest holders of STE. They're one of the largest depositors in Lido, and Nexus is a portfolio company. And one thing people don't realize of insurance companies is a lot of most insurance companies in the traditional world make money through earning yield on their capital pool rather than their core business of premiums minus claims. And like Nexus is earning yield on all the ETH through Lido.
That's right. That's right. Can't wait for T-bills on chain in this interest rate environment.
Cool. And then, I mean, we talked a lot about like Ethereum, and this, like the product right now is like pretty Ethereum centric.
That's right.
Obviously the industry is like moving gradually from proof of work to proof of stake, and like pretty much every new chain, every new L1 is proof of stake in some way. Are there any other chains, ecosystems that like excite you with regard to their staking?
Yeah, I think Polygon is interesting, Solana is interesting, Polkadot is interesting, Cosmos is super interesting. So there's a lot of work for us if we are to kind of fulfill this mission that we set out to achieve and bring to bear. So yeah, I think these are the points that we would start looking to next. And I hope that the original vision for Rated is to instantiate as a multi-network and multi-agent suite of products and really kind of surface everything that we can. And when I say multi-agent is, after validator nodes, there's all these other types of nodes that we talked about, right? Like oracles, like relayers, like sequencers down the line, which is kind of basically the equivalent of a validator. It's the machine that ties together an off-chain execution environment and with the security properties of something like Ethereum, for example, also known as rollups. So all these machines will have performance to be scored. They will have metadata and attributes to be attached to them, and we're really here to do all of this work.
And as you say, obviously in the long term, like roadmap, like Rated, it's not just going to be Ethereum focused, it's going to expand to like other chains. And like along that note, do you think like the current market leaders in Ethereum staking space, like the Lidos of the world, like the largest node operators like Stakefish and others, are they going to be able to expand like cross-chain easily, or are there like idiosyncratic natures of Polygon, Solana, Polkadot, Cosmos, these other chains where it'll be like a different project that's focused on like each chain?
Yeah, they largely are already. In terms of the node operators are like really active across many networks, and this is one of the really interesting things that we think we can go and effectively meet the market where the market's needs are, right? At least so far as node operators go. Lido and other liquid staking pools like have already cross-chain footprints. Lido, I think, is operating in at least another 3 chains.
Yeah, I know they're in Cosmos for sure.
Yeah, so I don't know that they have launched yet or they're about to launch. They launched recently. So there's Cosmos for sure. There's Polygon. They're on Solana. They're on Polkadot. So that's four aside of Ethereum. But the interesting thing that we've seen there is that, for example, in Solana, Lido has actually struggled to get to a leadership position. Last time I checked the numbers, at least, and that's a while now. And the first mover there, which is a protocol called Marinade, was actually able to capture and maintain that leadership. So these advantages that these protocols get in terms of like size and liquidity and integration and so on, like that come together with being the first mover, aside of kind of like the brand association and so on, are actually proving to be pretty significant and tangible.
Right, right. And plus, like, I've also heard the argument that you kind of have an influence on like core protocol decisions and like design when you're a market leader and you're like a first mover in there. And like you can kind of design the spec to how you would build your liquid staking protocol.
There's an argument to be made about everything in that respect, right? Like in Coinbase or rollups or who is the protocol supposed to serve? And specifically when the protocol is in active development and is not ossified, like something like Bitcoin is, for example, which is like, okay, Bitcoin is going to be this thing, we agreed, and then we're kind of like letting it, we're not messing with it. Ethereum is in actually like constant development, right? Because Ethereum's vision is to try and be this global computer or global financial system like base layer. And so it's really an interesting philosophical question, even like who is the protocol supposed to serve, if not its main users or utilities or facilities that bring the most value back to the protocol, right? Should the protocol be a completely sort of led by doctrine or some divine inspiration thing in terms of kind of modifying itself and amending itself to accommodate, or should it serve in the biggest air quotes possible customers, right? It's a real interesting sort of amalgam of information and need-want sets that kind of actually produce the outcomes that we see.
Yeah, and well, why don't we end it at there, like kind of the open philosophical question: who should the protocol serve?
I love it. Thanks, Richard.
Great.